Let's talk about executive messages. What makes them so special? It's not because they're delivered by executives. It's because they are clear and influential. I think we call them executive messages because the very best executives deliver those kinds of messages and they motivate us to action. That's the importance of executive messages, the clarity and the motivation to action. But how do we develop them? How do we do that? How do we make our messages powerful and influential and so crystal clear? I want to share with you a 5-step method that will help you do it. And it'll help you do it pretty easily if you really work with it, if you really pay attention to it and practice it. Let's start with step 1. Step 1 is knowing what you want from your message. A lot of people laugh when I tell them that. They say, well, of course. But when I ask them what they want from their message, it's very difficult for them to tell me. It's probably the most difficult step of the 5. Here's a question you can ask yourself to help you with it. What do I want my audience of 1 or 5 or 10 or 10,000 to think differently or do differently after I finish? If you can't answer that question with crystal clarity, you're not ready to move past this step. And it's deceivingly simple, deceivingly simple. In other words, it's harder than it looks. I've worked with clients that have said things like, I want the support of senior management. What does that mean? It means nothing. We have to define exactly what kind of support we're talking about. We have to get down to where the rubber meets the road in order to satisfy that question. You need to know exactly what you want in measurable ways. Now, there are a couple other questions that can help you with it. One is, ask yourself why you want what you want. What's the end game? What's this all about anyway? Why do we want to do this? And another question you can ask to help is, how am I going to implement this? What is it exactly that I'm doing? If you spend time with this know what you want, you're on the path to developing a good message. Now let's go to step 2, because step 2 is about knowing your audience. It's about understanding why your audience wouldn't grant what you want. I mean, after all, if you didn't need to have them grant what you want, you wouldn't need to deliver the message. But in organizations, we need to sell our ideas. We need to get other people on board with our initiatives. So you need to know who that audience is. And you need to know specifically who that audience is, because the important question here is, what do I need to do to address their concerns, their interests, their questions, their fears? To the extent that you can do that effectively, you'll get what you want. To the extent that you can't, or that you fail to even address interests and concerns, you won't get what you want, or you're less likely to get what you want. Now, this doesn't have to be done with complete sentences. All you're trying to do is identify what the obstacles are, what's in your way of getting what you want. That's why it's so important to know with crystal clarity what you want. Now, let's go to step 3. Step 3 is where most people start developing their presentation. They say, well, how much time do I have? And what do I think is the most important thing to talk about? You're in a better position than that. You know what you want with crystal clarity, and you know what you need to address in order to get it. This stage, this step, is about addressing each and every one of those concerns with the most powerful, influential, persuasive argument that you can make. If you do that well, you're much more likely to get what you want. Another interesting thing falls out of this step. People often write to me or call me and say, how do I think better on my feet? And my answer to them is, think better before you get on your feet. And sometimes they think that's a smart aleck answer. It's not a smart aleck answer. When I say think better, it's not because you haven't thought deeply. You've often thought very deeply about what you want, but you haven't thought about it the way your audience is thinking about it. And so you get blindsided by questions that seem to come out of left field. When, instead, if you would have taken the time to find out what was on their minds, you would be much, much better prepared, in a much better position to answer the questions. But this is the stage where you construct those persuasive arguments, one objection or element at a time. Now, we'll go to step 4. In step 4, what you're trying to do is string those elements together in a way that tells an interesting story. You want to make it flow. You want to make it logical for you. So when you look at the proofs, the persuasive arguments that you have, put them together in a way that makes it easy for you to tell. If it's not easy for you to tell, continue to play around with it so that it becomes easy for you to tell the story. And always use an audience-friendly vocabulary. Always. We sometimes in organizations fall into the jargon and acronym trap. Don't do that. It will lead your audience astray. It'll cause them to try and figure out what those letters stand for while you're presenting. So you're going on down the path with your presentation. They're trying to figure out what the acronym means. Remember, we're always fighting for audience attention. We want to win more than we lose. So don't distract them with unnecessary acronyms or jargon. Now, finally, let's go to step 5. Step 5 is simply keeping it simple. Tell your story in the most straightforward way you can. What I like to do is start out saying, let's talk about executive presence. What is it? Why do we care? The audience knows where I'm going. There's no guesswork. Now, you can take another approach. But you need to be careful of this approach. But you can take another approach. You can do something like this. You can say, how would you like to have $150,000 more when you retire than you would have otherwise, without taking any more risk, without working any harder, without doing anything much different than you're doing today? Let's talk about investing in the 401k program. Now, you've got 2 ways to start. But remember, keep it simple, whatever way you start, and be careful of that second method because it's very easy to get too trite. The bottom line is, do not make your audience work, because they won't. They want you to do the work, and as a speaker, that's your job.